an important part of a growing community. The following program is brought to you by Denver's Cable Health Consortium, a group of concerned local health organizations presenting quality programs for a healthier Denver.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Dykstra with the debut of Denver Medical Forum. On our show, we hope to provoke discussion on something which many regard to be the largest industry in the United States, the healthcare industry. Each month, we'll do a series of shows on topics that we hope will be very close to the core of your life: healthcare, your health, and the health of people you care about. This month, we're going to do a show on something that we all hold in common: growing older and the issues that confront us as that happens. Most specifically in that, what are our national priorities in the healthcare system in caring for older people? Joining us to discuss this evening are Kitty Pring, the Director of Adult Services for the Denver County Department of Social Services; John Torres, the Executive Director of the Colorado Association of Homes and Services for the Aging; Leonard Johnson, the State Director for the American Association of Retired Persons. Kitty, why don't you start us off and tell us something about this mythological couple. Who are they when we talk about a senior citizen or a retired person or even an older person? Who are Mr. and Mrs. Jones who live down the street from us?
Oh, gee, Chris, I think one of the dilemmas for those of us who are in the field of aging is that there is no mythical or perfect representative of growing older. It depends on programmatic definitions. It depends on how people adapt to the processes of aging. For purposes of labor programs, employment programs, you're old at the age of 45. For purposes of retirement, if we're talking about Mr. and Mrs. Jones, they're probably in their early to late 60s. They're probably still married. They're probably have children who are not living in their immediate proximity. They're probably scattered. They probably still have a very active social group.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Dykstra with Denver Medical Forum. Tonight we're kicking off our December series, Family in Transition, with a look at the changing family and its changing definitions in a society that may not provide many clear boundaries. Helping me with the task are Sylvia Clark, the Executive Director for Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains, State Senator Terry Considine, and Martha Schwader-Hughes, an Associate Professor of Sociology at Metro. Is that correct?
Yes.
Martha, why don't you start things off by identifying some of the more obvious trends
in
families in general, yeah.
I would say the most obvious trend is that our idealized traditional family doesn't exist. Less than 10%, basically 5% of all families are the typical idealized traditional family of mother at home, father at work, and children from the first marriage. So that what we're seeing is tremendous diversity in families, which is historically fairly typical in the United States.
How are some of the trends that we're experiencing in our society? For example, teen pregnancy, the current AIDS crisis. How are these changing our definitions of family or strengthening our old definitions, perhaps?
I'm not sure that the heterosexual community as yet has defined it as a heterosexual issue. So AIDS, I'm not sure, has had a huge impact. Historically, teen pregnancy is nothing new. In the 17th century, 10% of all women were pregnant at the time they got married. In the 18th century, it was 30%. So that's nothing new. What we're defining as a crisis in the family is based on what you were talking about earlier, our image of what the 1950 family was like. which was atypical historically. So those changes have, in some ways, I think, strengthened the family because it's required that it become more adaptable. Teen pregnancy has had single parents have one very definite problem, and there's no doubt about it, and that's economics. And if you look, and divorce has the same problem. Women drop 73% in terms of their living standard upon divorce. Men improve by 42%. So your primary crisis is an economic one, and I still see family as primarily an economic unit to a significant degree.
Is that the way the Senate views it?
Well, no, I guess I would start with values and commitment and really see it more as an emotional tie before an economic tie. But the economics are terribly important to me. And in the Senate, I've worked hard for child support collections, for example, which I think is a matter of simple justice. I've been toying with an issue for next year, and I'd be glad to ask your opinion, Marcia, because it's one that 15 or 17 years ago when I was in law school, I might have lost my head among my feminist colleagues on the law review if I brought it up. But thinking about those statistics you've just said, I wonder if it isn't time to revisit the concept of no-fault divorce.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Dykstra with Denver Medical Forum. Tonight is the third in our series on the family in transition. It's called Holiday Bliss or Blues, and it deals with some of the anxiety surrounding the holidays. Joining me now are Jan Thurn, a PhD in family therapy.
In psychology.
In psychology. And Jean Goody, a consumer counselor, the Director of Education from the Consumer Credit Counseling Service.
Correct.
And Esther O'Sullivan, the Marketing Director for A Woman's Place at Rocky Mountain Hospital. Is that something that's useful in dealing with eating disorders?
Absolutely. I think, again, one of the key things, whether it's for financial or for the kinds of things Jan was talking about, in terms of people with eating disorders, the key thing, again, is planning. What can they anticipate in terms of, I'm going to this party where there's going to be lots of food, there's going to be lots of drink. If I have 2 drinks, what does that do to my ability to, many times a drink will stimulate the appetite, or certainly it affects your maybe decision process of what you're going to eat or not going to eat. It's easier to position yourself by the buffet table and not leave it. So knowing what that situation is going to be about, what can you do to plan for it? In terms of how long you're going to stay, who's going to be there that that might be able to help you if you feel like you're getting into a situation where you're losing that control. Planning with the family. Families are notorious in during the holiday times and having all kinds of food prepared. I mean, there's food everywhere, and wanting you to eat more. How to let your family know how they can help and how not to push food on you.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Dykstra with Denver Medical Forum. We're in the second show of our series on alternative medicine, and tonight we'll be exploring the Tao of medicine. Helping me with the topic are Ron Rosen, a doctor of acupuncture and a diplomate of the Commission for Certification of Acupuncture and the director of the, help me out, Ron.
The Acupuncture and Traditional Asian Medicine Clinic.
Clinic, correct. Okay. I had that somewhere buried in there. And Steve Oakley, who is a certified acupuncturist, a Reiki master, and the director of the Cardinal Center for Health and Fitness. Did I get that all correct?
Pretty close. Cardinal Institute for Health and Fitness.
Cardinal Institute. Thanks for helping me out. So, Stephen, when you said that it might take it, Eastern medicine has a different concept of now.
Well, in that there might be we often work in the West with the symptomatology, isolating that and dealing with that, relieving the problem.
You runs antibiotics to the child.
Right.
Okay.
And yet, depending on what that situation may be, depending on what that dysfunction, that disharmony, that imbalance may be, there may actually be, and typically is, a deeper cause. And so in Chinese medicine, because we view the human being as an interrelation of systems, we're looking for ways to rebalance, to bring this back into harmony, so that the whole being, so that problem doesn't recur.
Again, we're gonna do an actual acupuncture here, and he's going to.
I just want to make sure there's no reason not to.
What can you tell by doing this?
This is our major diagnostic tool, is pulse taking. We measure 18 pulses between the two arms, and we measure approximately 27 different qualities of each of those pulses. Do a simple insertion.
Do I need to?
No, that's fine.
That's it?
That's it.
Now what is this doing? I want to assure you this doesn't hurt at all. Now it does. No, I'm just kidding.
Basically, I'm using a simple point for little calming effect and balancing the yang energy. You're a little bit yang deficient in your...
Yang deficient. Now what would that be? Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Dykstra with Denver Medical Forum. In 1987, Colorado's infant mortality rate ranked 37th in the nation. And for the vast majority of children who live, the world will hold an increasingly complex variety of challenges, decisions, and choices. In this series, we will explore the issues facing our children from infancy to adolescence. Tonight, we'll be talking about prenatal care. Helping me with the topic are Denise Smith, a prenatal nutrition counselor or educator.
Educator.
Peggy Eggers, who is a childbirth educator. And, Patrice Sikora, who is a neonatal nurse and a fitness instructor, as well as a parent educator. Now, Peggy, it seems as though when you talk about prenatal care, you're talking about a many-faceted thing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain in a comprehensive way what prenatal care is?
Well, I think it has to do with every aspect, every level on which someone lives. I think the physiologic certainly needs to be addressed, both in nutrition as well as fitness, and in good prenatal care from a care provider of a woman's choice, whether it be a family practice doctor, an obstetrician, or a certified nurse midwife. All of those are people who are particularly well-versed in being able to care for an expectant mother and her child. And I think another aspect of good prenatal care is caring about the family, caring about the mother and her support system, and the type of education and enlightenment that they can receive in what I do, childbirth education, to prepare them for the physiologic aspects of labor and birth, as well as begin to look at the parenting role beyond. And so I think that's another component that helps to round out the physiologic, is the addressing in a group situation of some of their common concerns and learning together, people who are all looking at this big hurdle of labor and birth.
Welcome to the Denver Medical Forum. Chris Dykstra is on holiday this week. I'm Gregory Lee, moderator for this series about health and fitness. This is the third show in our series. Today we'll look at the field of therapeutic recreation. Joining us for a panel discussion are our guests, Chris Katzenmeyer, Director of Therapeutic Recreation at Spaulding Hospital, and Dr. Bart Goldman, Medical Director for the Center for Spine Rehabilitation. What types of people are generally the ones who use therapeutic recreation the most?
What types of
Yeah,
people?
in terms of illnesses or categories of, can you group people that way?
You can group special populations that way, and any special population that you can think of, whether it be mental retarded to developmentally disabled, to anyone with an emotional problem, you probably can adapt therapeutic recreation, and if they're in some sort of institution or clinic or something, they may very well be working with therapeutic recreation specialists.
Okay. I think now would be a good time to take a look at a program that you brought along with you. And Chris, while we're viewing this, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what we're seeing,
Okay.
so we'll understand the field a little bit better.
Sure.
Okay?
So what we're seeing here is we're seeing some therapeutic recreation specialists working with the stroke patients who have brought in some children from the daycare center, and they're both working on a project, and the physical kinds of functioning things that are being improved here are some fine motor movement that you can see while they're cutting the paper. And I think just as important as the physical part of it is they're also being motivated. They're working with children whose natural abilities to motivate people are really coming through. This little girl was just really, I thought, working very well with this man. What happened after this afternoon was they were a lot more motivated for the rest of their therapies. This woman is working on needlepoint. She was a young stroke victim in her early 30s, who after she had the stroke was totally thought that life was over. And with the help of the recreational specialist here, she's realizing that maybe she only has one hand now, but she can still pursue some of the things that she really enjoys. And that really brought a lot of quality back into a life that she thought was very devastated. This woman is now a volunteer, went on to become a volunteer at Spalding Hospital. This woman speaks for herself. She's in her 90s. She also had a stroke. She's working on the upper body strengthening, and we've got her playing a game of ping pong with a Nerf ball, and she's just having a ball. She's delightful. As she's playing with this gentleman who's also a patient there, she's flirting, as you can just see that as she winks at him. And so she's having fun, she's socializing, she's working her upper body, and getting all the benefits of all three. She was a delight. We don't believe that the quality of life stops with anyone at any certain age. Here's a similar group, but it's the same sort of activity done in a group setting. And they are all stroke patients, and they're all working on their upper body strengthening. A lot of them only have one arm or one side that's useful at this point, but they're getting that side a lot stronger by this kind of activity. And we can't zero in on their faces a little bit, but if you did, there's a lot of smiles that come with, there's one. And they're doing some very physical sorts of activities in the realm of fun, and they're incorporating all of it together and for their own physical and emotional well-being.
Thank you for bringing.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Dykstra with Denver Medical Forum. We're in the middle of our 4-part series on emergency medicine, and tonight's topic is emergencies in the home, what to do about it when they happen. Joining me, is Dr. Donald Safer, DDS, and Mike Berg, a lieutenant in the Bancroft Fire Department and a paramedic. Mike, when do you call a paramedic?
I think that's probably one of the main problems that people have. I think you need to know that the know that the system exists for you, and I think that if you feel that you're in a situation that you're not trained for or that is not in control, that you need to have controlled, I think that is instantly the time. It's better to call right when you're thinking about it. Yeah, if you have actually had time to sit and think that I need to call the paramedic, you've already wasted time.
do it.
That's an interesting point. At the minute you start to lose control, I mean,
Well,
it seems like if you're losing control, you might not be able to...
Yeah, normally, I think the perception is when we go on any kind of an emergency call, whether it's the flu or, you know, a devastating heart attack or whatever we go on, I think we all look at it with the idea that it's that person's emergency, okay, that somehow something in that person's environment has gotten away from them, okay, that they're not in control of that situation. And they're calling the fire department or the paramedics or, you know, the actual medical services to take control of that situation and place them into a safe condition.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Dykstra with Denver Medical Forum. We're in the last series of our season, and it's on chronic diseases. In tonight's show, we're going to try and achieve a broad understanding of what a chronic disease is and how it affects us. Joining me are Linda Dusenberry, the Director of the Cardiovascular Program at the Colorado Department of Health, and Sharon Michael, the Chief of the Chronic Diseases Section for the Colorado Department of Health. And my third guest is not with the Colorado Department of Health. As he pointed out earlier, he's Herb Kaplan, MD, with the Denver Arthritis Clinic and Chairman of the Board for the Arthritis Foundation. Herb, why don't you begin by delineating some of the differences between different types of diseases, and I'll let you define them since I'm an ordinary layman.
Well, since we're talking about chronic disease, I suppose the easiest separation would be something acute and chronic. An acute disease is something that gets better fast and it's over with. Excuse me, and chronic is something, especially from the patient's point of view, if it hangs on very long, it becomes chronic. And where that cutoff comes is a big gray area where acute ends and chronic begins.
Why is it gray?
Because there are some acute illnesses, like certain pneumonias, which would be an acute illness, that may take weeks to get over with. You might call tuberculosis, which is still around, an acute illness because there's an endpoint from it. It is curable. So an acute illness to me is something which has a beginning and a perceived possible endpoint. A disease like many that I deal with, not all of the arthritic diseases are chronic, but there are most chronic arthritic diseases fall in the chronic category because they begin, and there's really no cure that I can say you're going to be well by 1991 or 1992. So if there's a vague horizon beyond that you keep approaching but never get there, that to me is chronic.